This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
A parliament session was suspended in the Somali city of Bedawa after the president and the prime minister could not make their speeches because angry parliament members kept on yelling and protesting.
Meanwhile, some Islamic leaders, especially in the city of Kismayo, South Somalia, started to vocalize their opposition to the Djibouti agreement, which was signed by the Somali government and the coalition led by Sheikh Sharif Sheikh Ahmad.
The sounds of the Islamic groups that oppose the Djibouti agreement are becoming more vocal. Sheikh Hassan Turki, who has the confidence of Islamic fighters in southern Somalia and whose supporters are now in control of many towns and villages in this area, is now among the leaders of the Islamic group who reject the Djibouti agreement. Islamic groups' leaders believe that this agreement is designed to keep them from achieving their goals. This comes at a time when these groups have gotten closer to achieving their goals through armed struggle.
What came out of the Djibouti agreement does not serve our interests. I think it jeopardizes the success of the Mujahideen. I do not recognize it.
Armed Islamic groups believe that the agreement did not lead to the withdrawal of Ethiopian forces from Somalia. Rather, it has legitimized the status quo, which they see as unstable. They believe that the Ethiopian forces control Somalia via the current government, which compelled them to continue fighting.
As long as the enemy remains in our country, talks about peace are illogical and useless. We will not negotiate until the enemy leaves Somalia.
The co-signers of the Djibouti agreement had hoped that the agreement would end the political and security problems in Somalia. But what is happening on the ground shows that it has led to more military escalation. The numbers of the Islamic groups that oppose the Djibouti agreement are constantly increasing. In addition, the fighting has never stopped. Therefore, these might be indications of a new crisis, where the unstable political conditions in Somalia will deteriorate further. Political analysts have said that it is premature to celebrate the Djibouti agreement, as long as it was not blessed by the armed Islamic groups who play a main role in the success or failure of any agreement. They also said that excluding the Islamic groups makes the success of the agreement harder to achieve.
Jazeera, Somal.
The international activists who symbolically violated the Israeli-imposed siege on Gaza in support of the Palestinians sailed back to Cyprus.
On their way back, the international activists took with them 7 Palestinian children, including a boy who lost one of his legs when his home was bombarded by the Israelis. The activists arrived in Gaza in the beginning of this week on 2 boats full of food supplies for the people in Gaza who have suffered from a 14-month-old siege.
Like the legendary mermaids, the 2 siege-breaking boats disappeared behind the waves. The activists on the boat left Gaza with thousands of tragic stories and with images of the oppressive occupation and siege imprinted in their memory. They came to rescue the Gazans and went back with many pleas for help. Save Gaza before it is too late. This call was made to the international community, which has been as silent towards what has been happening in Gaza as dead bodies in their graves.
The world community to wake up because
The world community must wake up. All of us are human beings, and what is happening in Palestine is the responsibility of the entire world, not only the responsibility of Israel, because America supports Israel. The international community must wake up.
People to wake up.
These activists were listening to the small details of the tragic lives of Gazans. They are being subjected to things that cannot be comprehended by any logic. For a few moments, the activists united in Gaza with the West Bank. They received Palestinian passports on orders from President Abbas and the ousted Prime Minister Ismail Haniyeh. Some of the activists left with the promise that they will come back one day.
I would like that those of us who stay.
I would like those who have decided to stay to challenge the siege. We should do things that give people hope. For me, I would like to work with the Palestinians here as equals.
As equals.
Accompanying the fishermen.
I will accompany the fishermen who face difficulties because of the Israeli naval force. We did this 2 days ago, and we plan to repeat it.
Repeated.
The two siege-breaking ships have offered hope to alleviate some of the sadness in Gaza, like a drowning victim hanging by a string for dear life. This family will be reunited after living away from each other for a long time. This child will leave along with international activists, hoping that he will come back walking on 2 feet. This human gesture was met with gratitude and prayers.
I am very grateful for them because it will help me get an artificial leg so I can walk.
I am very grateful to the Cypriot government because it will help me reunite with my children. And I'm grateful to the foreigners for standing in solidarity with us. I hope that they will be models for others.
No matter how long the darkness of the night lasts, it will eventually dissipate and the daylight will prevail even if it comes in intervals. Light will shine, even if lifting the siege and opening the crossings are delayed. This visit was limited in time, but had great implications. It stayed in Gaza only a few days, but its success exceeded all expectations. The ship broke the siege, a siege that has maximized the suffering of the Gazans, leaving them asking, hasn't the time come? Lana Shaheen, Nile News Channel.
1
week is separating us from the Pakistani presidential elections, which are not expected to bring a solution to the growing problems in the country. With the withdrawal of Nawaz Sharif from the Pakistani ruling coalition, the ongoing political battles with the conservatives in the West, and the sporadic but serious security breaches witnessed in the country, it seems that Pakistan, from the standpoint of observers, is on the verge of entering a new stage where anything is possible.
As soon as the echo of Musharraf's resignation speech subsided, the waves of disagreement started to rock the political boat, with the Pakistani ruling party and the opposition on board. This news comes after Nawaz Sharif, head of the Pakistan Muslim League, fired a bullet of mercy at his partnership with the ruling coalition, ending a 6-month political marriage between his party and the People's Party. The last leaf of spring has fallen after the departure of Pervez Musharraf.
The People's Party hopes to stay in power for the longest possible time. However, we must wait and see what happens next. The way the People's Party is running the country is not acceptable.
Pervez Musharraf might have become a political figure from the past. However, Pakistan's crises are continuing to pick up speed. The fierce competition between the People's Party and the Muslim League is expected to intensify as the country gets closer toward upcoming presidential elections. It's highly expected that the competition between the country's 2 largest parties may bring with it a wave of riots, chaos, and violence, not any less intense than what we've seen during Musharraf's reign, which may bring the country to a new cycle of political stalemate.
If the People's Party tries to dissolve the government of Punjab, which is currently run by Sharif's party, the consequences will be tragic. This will take us back to the 1990s, when the 2 major parties engaged in direct confrontations that ended with the return of the military to power.
As the countdown begins for Pakistan's presidential elections, it seems that Asif Zardari has a better shot of winning the race. Having said that, many people believe that Zardari will not be able to fill the political vacuum left behind by Benazir Bhutto and Musharraf. Others, however, believe that Zardari is a political figure easily influenced, making him one of the most favored candidates by political blocs inside and outside the country. Pakistan is on the verge of entering into a new stage, a stage that will likely be shaped by the relationship between the 2 largest parties parties in the country, the Muslim League and the People's Party, but without ignoring the role of the military institution and foreign interventions in the country. Abed Rahman Zaini, Al Arabiya, Islamabad.
Sudanese children from the various elementary schools in the districts of Kober, Kafuri, and Waha in the governorate of Khartoum held a demonstration today to condemn and protest against the International Criminal Court's indictment of the Sudanese president for genocide in Darfur. During the protest in front of the UN headquarters in Khartoum, the protesters handed a letter of condemnation to the UN representative in Sudan. In the letter, the children wrote, "The children of Sudan hereby condemn the acts of killing and displacement committed against the children of the world." In a show of solidarity with the children of Darfur and in support of Darfur's national plight, the Sudanese First Lady, Fatima Khalid, received symbolic presents from school children in Kober, Kafuri, and Waha in the governorate of Khartoum.
We are very proud of this gathering. You came here today to voice your support of your father, Omar al-Bashir, who is victorious, God willing. Thank you for coming out here today. May God reward you for your action. Thank God and praise Him for making us Muslims.
The Secretary of Organization and Administration in Sudan's ruling National Congress Party, Dr. Gutba al-Makti, received a pledge of support and unity from the Sudanese Workers' Women's Federation. This news comes as the Women's Federation held its first forum on the role of female Sudanese workers in the agricultural sector. In addition, the Secretary General of Sudan's Women's Workers' Federation confirmed that her organization will launch during the upcoming stage a number of projects in all three federal states of Darfur. Meanwhile, the Sudanese Minister of Environment and Physical Development and the head of the Nation Party, Dr. Ahmad Bikr al-Nahar, addressed the crowd who gathered in the state of Kasla to call for national unity. Al-Nahar reiterated his party's commitment to helping the people and providing them with the most needed public services. He also called for making preparations for the upcoming elections and added that his party is seeking to solve the Darfur crisis, confirming that any solution must come from within Sudan. He further said that a solution is possible through dialogues and national consensus and warned against foreign interventions.
Is reaching out to the Hamas terror group amid fears that a collapse of Middle East peacemaking could potentially create an influx of refugees. IBA's Yochanan El Rome spoke to Dan Diker of the Jerusalem Center of Public Affairs about the Hashemite Kingdom's political about-face.
Jordan is in a moment of geopolitical crisis. It looks at the Hamas, at the victory of the Muslim Brotherhood Directorate by actually a Hamas leader from Jenin, Hammam Saeed. This creates the threat of militarization of the Muslim Brotherhood in Jordan. They look to the West and they see Hamas as the strong card, as the strong horse in the West Bank, and they see what happened with Hamas in Gaza. Jordan wants to balance its interests and maintain good relations even with the Hamas, which it considers an illegal organization in Jordan.
Now, what are the ramifications for this apparent shift in policy by Jordan for the Israeli-Palestinian peace process?
Well, there are a number of ramifications, Yochanan. Number one, it essentially leverages up Jordan's position with Fatah, which it has traditionally had a better relationship, clearly, than Hamas. But it over time is not going to affect it because Jordan knows that it is going to have to play a central role in any peace process, in any final status agreement. And what it's doing now is essentially just managing its relationship with Hamas, as it knows it will have to cooperate very strongly with the Fatah in any future peace process, knowing that the Hamas relationship with Fatah is at an all-time low.
Unlike leaders who chased the media, A.B. Nathan believed in what he did and deserves the title of a real leader. That's how Culture and Sports Minister Ghalib Majadle described the peace activist who died yesterday at the age of 81. Nathan was buried this afternoon at the Kiryat Shaul Cemetery in Tel Aviv. President Shimon Peres eulogized Nathan, saying that although the two men didn't always agree, it was always impossible to ignore Abi, whom Peres described as, quote, a real person who's always helped others before helping himself. Both Nathan and the radio station he founded were known as the Voices of Peace, whose calls for historic reconciliation with the Palestinians were way ahead of their time. Nathan was also involved in disaster relief in Cambodia, Bangladesh, Colombia, and Ethiopia.
India now, where another 87 people have died in flooding there, mainly in the northeastern state of Bihar. Military personnel and rescuers have been struggling to reach the millions left stranded by the rising waters of River Kosi. Shireen Tadros has more.
1,500 Indian army and paramilitary soldiers are helping with the rescue effort, but it's still not enough. The devastation has been unimaginable. These are the worst floods in half a century.
We have never seen such terrible floodings, nor have we heard about it from our grandparents.
Railway tracks and roads have been submerged, meaning the only way aid can get through is by dropping parcels from the air. But they don't always reach the most vulnerable. This boy was asked how long he hasn't eaten for. 5 days, he replies. There are villages here in the eastern Indian state of Bihar that are now completely underwater. Heavy rain caused the Kosi River to burst its bank last week, unleashing a torrent of water to surrounding villages. More than 100,000 people have been evacuated. Millions are now homeless. It's a humanitarian disaster. The country's prime minister says he's doing everything possible.
We have decided to release 125,000 tons of food grain. I want to assure the people of Bihar that the entire country and the central government are with the people of Bihar in this hour of need.
The flooding is now affecting people in neighboring Nepal, where the River Kosi originates. Rescuers across the region continue to search for those trapped. Their task made more difficult by the continuing rain. Shireen Tadros, Al Jazeera.
Georgia has severed its diplomatic ties with Russia over its recent conflict in the Caucasus.
We'll cut diplomatic relations with the Russian Federation. This means that Georgia will not have a diplomatic corps to conduct political assignments in Russia, and that Russia won't have a diplomatic corps to conduct political assignments in Georgia.
Well, Georgia's deputy foreign minister said his country would pull its diplomats out of its embassy in Moscow. Tbilisi also urged Russia to immediately withdraw its peacekeepers from Abkhazia and South Ossetia. It says it has annulled the two agreements signed in '92 and '94 that allow Russian peacekeepers to operate in the two breakaway regions. This comes as Russia plans to sign a military cooperation agreement with South Ossetia. Under the deal, Russia will be able to set up several military bases in the breakaway region. The agreement is expected to be signed on Tuesday. Well, Russia has called on the EU leaders to decide based on reason and not emotion. The European bloc has plans to hold a summit next week to discuss sanctions against Moscow over its conflict with Georgia. The United States and its European allies condemned the Russian decision to recognize the independence of the Georgian breakaway regions of South Ossetia and Abkhazia. Russia rejects EU threats as a product of a sick imagination. Moscow says the security group of former Soviet states, the Collective Security Treaty Organization, will discuss the recognition of the two regions at a meeting in Moscow next week. The humanitarian situation in the South Ossetian conflict zone in Georgia is catastrophic. That's what Council of Europe Human Rights Commissioner Thomas Hammerberg says. Our correspondent Svetlana Korkina has the full story.
The war lasted several days. Its consequences may last for years. The Council of Europe's Human Rights Commissioner believes the political aspects of the conflict have overshadowed the humanitarian catastrophe. He's toured Tshinvali, Gorit, Peole, South Ossetian and Georgian villages and says the situation is disastrous.
Tens of thousands of people were forced to flee. Some from the northern side have been able now to move back, but others are remaining, for instance, in North Ossetia. There's a huge number of displaced people in Georgia.
They've been taking refuge in makeshift tent camps set up in Georgia and neighboring Russia. Many people have to go without enough food, water or warm clothes. Some are still afraid to come back to their houses for fear of violence. Hammerbeck voiced concern over a police vacuum in some areas and other problems hampering the return.
The number of bombs and unexploded ordnances which are spread in the landscape on both sides. Both parties have to declare which weapons, which arms, which bombs they used, when they were fired, and in what direction.
South Ossetian authorities say 1,700 people died in the hostilities. According to Hammerbeck, the death toll can be higher than the number of bodies found.
There are quite a number of people missing, and one doesn't know whether they are dead or whether they are in hiding. Also, we know that a number of bodies found in the villages have been buried on the spot. I even heard people saying that they were buried in the garden just outside the house.
The EU human rights chief has urged all sides in the conflict to ensure safety and help people move back to their homes as soon as possible. Next week, Thomas Hammerberg will present a detailed report on human rights violations during the South Ossetian conflict. It will contain humanitarian measures. He says the priority now is to help those who suffered from the hostilities get back to normal life. Sudan Korkina, Press TV, Moscow.
The Democratic National Convention nominates Barack Obama by acclamation as its candidate for November's presidential election. Hundreds of media outlets from across the globe have descended on Denver to cover the convention. What did the Arab media say about Joe Biden and Jimmy Carter in light of this event? Answers to these questions and more on Link TV's Mosaic Intelligence Report.
It has been a dizzying week trying to watch most of the speeches at the Democratic National Convention while they are talked over by network anchors, then sliced and diced by their best political teams. CNN's Wolf Blitzer and company took center stage in the arena like sportscasters, while other network anchors reported from sky boxes, each offering his or her take on the performance of the speakers in a party-like atmosphere. Arab media was no exception. Several Arab networks dispatched their best anchors to Denver to beam a sliver of American politics to more than 300 million viewers in the region. Will Obama end the nightmare that Bush created in the Middle East? Debated their own pundits and best political teams on television? Al Jazeera promised its viewers an in-depth coverage of the US election, but it always comes down to the Palestinian-Israeli litmus test. Arabs no longer question US support to Israel. They no longer have illusions that a new American president would somehow do a 180-degree turn and change US policies in their favor. Instead, they now measure things based on how pro-Israel the candidates are. In the United States, Obama's choice of Biden as a vice presidential running mate was seen by some critics as tacit admission that he lacked sufficient experience in this area. Not in the Arab media. This was seen as a shrewd maneuver to woo American Jewish voters and pro-Israeli groups in the United States. Within minutes of last Saturday's announcement that Democratic Senator and former presidential candidate Joe Biden would be Barack Obama's running mate in the 2008 presidential election, I started to receive emails linking to an interview Biden had on the Jewish cable television network Shalom TV in March 2007. The senator from Delaware expressed strong support for Israel, calling it the single greatest strength America has in the Middle East, and emphatically declaring that you don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist.
That Israel is the single greatest strength America has in the Middle East. When I was a young senator, I say, if I were a Jew, I'd be a Zionist. I am a Zionist. You don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist.
Meanwhile, Jimmy Carter's no speech at the DNC was a big story in the Arab press. According to several Arab pundits, Democrats were determined not to allow the former president to spoil their Denver party with talk of even-handed policies in the Middle East. So, after a video of Carter's work helping to rebuild homes in Gulf Coast areas devastated by Hurricane Katrina in 2005 was screened, former U.S. President Jimmy Carter, holding wife Rosalind's hand, did a quick stroll on stage and waved without a word. Carter spoke at the 2004 convention. However, this was before the publication of his controversial book, Palestine, Peace Not Apartheid, and his subsequent claims that pro-Israel activists were trying to silence him and any efforts to debate U.S. support for the Jewish state. Did the self-proclaimed Zionist Biden pull the plug on Carter, or was it Obama? Argued an Egyptian analyst on the Iranian Arabic-speaking Al-Manar TV. When asked about why he did not speak at the convention by Amy Goodman, Carter simply replied,
"Well, I was on the program."
Did you speak?
No, I had a
I know, I saw
video.
you wave.
No. Well, we had a video ahead of time. You didn't see the movie. That was it.
Very good.
That was it.
I'm Jamal Dajani for the Mosaic Intelligence Report. To learn more about this program or to share your thoughts, visit us at linktv.org/mosaic.
I'm Amy Goodman, host of Democracy Now!, here to ask you for support for Mosaic, world news from the Middle East. You know, in media news, a new study shows that corporate news coverage of the Iraq War has dropped sharply in the last 4 months. According to the Project for Excellence in Journalism, the Iraq War accounted for just 15% of news coverage, 19% of the network evening newscasts. We need more coverage of the Middle East, not less. We are talking right now about living in a time of war, and it is up to us in a democratic society to decide what to do about that. Mosaic provides information from the Middle East, from countries in the Middle East, from a Middle Eastern perspective. It is invaluable. And right now they need $200,000 to continue their work, to continue their coverage, to bring you their fall lineup of this essential program. The number to call to make your pledge is 866-485-8848. That's 866-485-8848. You can also pledge online at linktv.org. Please pledge as much as you can. Information is power. When you have information, you are empowered to do something about it. That's what Mosaic provides. Again, they're trying to raise $200,000. In order to do this, you can be a small or large part of that. Pledge 25, pledge 50, pledge 200, pledge 500. Mosaic needs you. If you've needed Mosaic for information, now they're asking you to help them reach their goal. That number again is 866-485-8848. That's 866-485-8848. Make your pledge, make it now. You can also pledge online at linktv.org. That number is the lifeline for Mosaic, 866-485-8848. Make the call that makes the difference. This is viewer-sponsored media. You are the engine of this program. Mosaic provides a unique perspective from many different countries in the Middle East. Please give your support to independent media, 866-485-8848. And thanks so much.
Get more news about the Middle East online at linktv.org/mosaic. The Mosaic webpage offers a complete archive of Mosaic programs, program transcripts, the Mosaic video podcast, and the Mosaic Intelligence Report, a weekly analysis of the hottest stories from the Middle East. The views expressed on Mosaic are those of the participating broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible with the support of viewers like you. Thank you. This program was brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. television network devoted to global and national news, with uncompromising documentaries and diverse cultural programs. Programs which connect you to the world.